Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. Saya Najib, Aroff dan ini Niaga Awani. Kementerian Kewangan MOF mencatatkan perbelanjaan tertinggi berjumlah 129.637 bilion ringgit atau 41.2% daripada keseluruhan perbelanjaan mengurus kerajaan persekutuan. Menurut laporan Ketua Audit Negara LKAN siri ketiga 2023, jumlah perbelanjaan itu meningkat 7.9% berbanding tahun sebelumnya. Peningkatan utama perbelanjaan Kementerian Kewangan membabitkan perkhidmatan am perbendaraan bagi program subsidi dan bantuan tunai berjumlah 54.631 bilion. Dan angka itu atau 17.5% berbanding 2022 lebih tinggi. Dan bagi mengulas lanjut, kita bersama dengan Profesor Madya Dr. Ahmad Razman Abdul Latif, pengarah program MBA Putra Business School. Assalamualaikum Doktor, terima kasih kerana bersama dengan kami pada waktu ini. Pertama sekali kita kena faham, angka yang tinggi ini untuk sebuah kementerian adalah berdasarkan dengan apa yang kita sebutkan tadi, iaitu subsidi dan juga bantuan tunai itu sendiri. Dan menjelang belanjawan 2025 nanti pada Jumaat ini, bagaimana untuk kita baca keseluruhan bahawa dalam konteks kita menstruktur ekonomi, perbelanjaan mengembang seperti ini dengan bajet yang agak besar harus dilaksanakan untuk kita strukturkan semua ekonomi, termasuk juga dalam aspek sosioekonomi, iaitu kedudukan masyarakat kita pada ketika ini, Doktor.
Ya, Najib, apabila kita merujuk kepada belanjawan 25 yang akan dibentangkan ini, kita lihat tema dia negara makmur, rakyat sejahtera, tetapi Perdana Menteri kita juga turut menyebut bahawa fokus dari segi menangani inflasi, menaikkan gaji dan juga menstrukturkan semula ekonomi. Dan apa yang akan berlaku di peringkat Kementerian Kewangan ini ialah pertama kita lihat bahawa bermula tahun ini dan juga tahun hadapan akan berlaku satu proses rasionalisasi subsidi yang kita lihat dimulakan dengan diesel, kemungkinan petrol R95 juga akan berlaku tahun hadapan yang akan mengurangkan kos pemberian subsidi secara pukal ini oleh kerajaan, tetapi pada masa yang sama akan meningkatkan bantuan tunai secara langsung kepada mereka yang layak, bukan sahaja B40 tetapi kalau ada juga golongan M40 layak, dan itu kita lihat apa yang akan berlaku, peningkatan yang akan dibelanjakan oleh Kementerian Kewangan untuk maksud subsidi dan juga bantuan tunai itu akan kekal tinggi, terutamanya di bahagian peruntukan tunai itu, kerana kita lihat sumbangan tunai ramah itu sentiasa meningkat jumlah bantuan kepada individu dan juga isi rumah, disebabkan ianya tidak lagi hanya semata-mata kepada B40 tetapi juga kepada M40 yang mungkin akan dapat menerima manfaatnya melalui pengaktifan bekalan data padu itu, yang membolehkan siapa yang ada tanggungan besar dan ramai dan duduk di bandar turut juga dapat bantuan.
Dr. Razman, kalau kita melihat kepada rekomendasi daripada LKAN ini tentang perbelanjaan mengurus oleh Kementerian Kewangan, antaranya adalah pertama meningkatkan janaan hasil, kedua adalah menambah baik tadbir urus dalam perbelanjaan awam dan juga pengurusan perbelanjaan awam sendiri, dan juga pada akhirnya apa yang digariskan adalah untuk memastikan bahawa pengurusan hutang yang lebih berhemah di peringkat persekutuan. Okey, tiga perkara ini kalau kita lihat ada langkah yang sedang diambil oleh kerajaan pada ketika ini. Cuma kalau kita lihat dari segi janaan hasil ini, tidak ada cukai baru setakat ini, dan bayangan yang diberikan oleh Perdana Menteri baru-baru ini juga soal GST, tunggulah gaji minimum ataupun gaji yang tersebut pada RM3,000, barulah kita consider, kita pertimbangkan untuk GST sebagai contoh. Bermaksud belanjawan ini tak ada GST lah kalau kita menerima bayangan tersebut, kan. Bagaimana kita melihat bahawa dengan tiada teks baru, tiada cukai baru, tapi pengurusan cukai sedia ada itu harus mantap? Adakah kita di landasan yang betul dalam konteks keseluruhan yang saya sebutkan tadi untuk memenuhi rekomendasi LKAN ini?
Ya, kalau kita lihat yang diberi cadangan oleh LKAN itu adalah meningkatkan hasil dan juga mengurangkan perbelanjaan ataupun sebenarnya mengawal ketirisan dan juga pembaziran serta rasuah. Oleh itu, pendekatan dari segi meningkatkan hasil ini tidak semestinya mengenalkan ataupun memperkenalkan cukai baru. Kita lihat pekerja, jumlah pekerja di Malaysia sekarang dah lebih daripada 16 juta. Tetapi yang membayar cukai pendapatan hanya sekitar 1.5 juta macam tu. Ini kerana gaji penengah ataupun median secara mediannya hanya berjumlah sekitar RM2,844 macam tu. Tidak, orang kata majoriti belum lagi orang kata layak untuk bayar cukai. Oleh itu, apabila kerajaan akan mula melihat bagaimana dapat tingkatkan gaji minimum ke tahap yang lebih tinggi, memperkenalkan gaji progresif, meningkatkan orang kata hubungan dagangan di luar negara itu supaya perniagaan dan industri di Malaysia ini boleh berkembang maju. Semuanya adalah untuk memastikan gaji naik dan mampu menyumbang kembali kepada negara melalui hasil kutipan cukai pendapatan dan juga cukai perniagaan. Dan pada masa yang sama, kita lihat juga bahawa rasionalisasi diesel yang telah dilakukan itu berjaya mengurangkan banyak ketirisan melalui kos penyeludupan dan sebagainya. Dan itu sebenarnya ada satu langkah juga untuk mengoptimumkan hasil yang diterima walaupun tidak semestinya meningkat yang begitu ketara, tetapi ianya sampai kepada rakyat, memberikan orang kata output dan impak yang diharapkanlah. Dan saya lihat semua ini hanya boleh dilakukan jika seperti yang telah disarankan oleh Ketua Negara, iaitu melalui tata kelola yang mantap. Dan kita lihatlah pembaruan fiskal melalui kelulusan Akta Kewangan Awam dan tanggungjawab fiskal, itu semua adalah penting untuk memastikan bahawa pelaksanaan itu dapat dilakukan dengan mengikut aturannya dan tidak ada lagi ruang untuk berlakunya ketirisan pembayaran dan yang kita amat takutilah berlaku elemen rasuah yang dulu menyebabkan negara kita menanggung beban hutang yang tinggi yang sampai sekarang masih lagi perlu dibayar.
Dr. Rasman, kalau kita melihat kepada apa yang dicadangkan ini juga, kesemuanya termasuk juga menambah baik dari segi tabik urus, perbelanjaan kita, hutang negara dan sebagainya, ini menuntut banyak langkah tidak popular. Kerana biasalah ini macam personal juga, macam secara peribadi. Kalau wang kita dikurangkan dari segi bajet kita belanja, kita pun tak happy lah, tak suka dan sebagainya. Tetapi ini penting untuk jangka masa yang panjang. Dan kerajaan pun sedang melaksanakan perkara ini, mungkin belum secara keseluruhan tapi sudah ada, kita nampak bibit itu. Bagaimana untuk kita membaca bahawa langkah tidak popular ini harus diambil sekarang dalam Belanjawan 2025 kerana dari segi kos politik yang mungkin lebih mudah, dan kedua dari segi waktunya, time frame-nya, jangka masanya adalah bersesuaian dengan apa yang kita ingin laksanakan, iaitu menstrukturkan ekonomi.
Ya, memang ini adalah masa yang sesuai kerana kita lihat satu faktor utama iaitu kestabilan politik kerajaan itu amat penting. Apabila kerajaan tidak orang kata pasti adakah akan kekal dalam masa terdekat, mungkin mereka akan mengambil pendekatan yang popular tetapi tidak semestinya efektif. Mungkin akan lebih banyak berbelanja untuk menyenangkan hati rakyat tetapi akhirnya akan ditimpa hutang yang lebih tinggi. Tetapi kerajaan yang stabil yang disokong oleh rakyat akan memastikan bahawa pendekatan jangka masa panjang harus juga diambil untuk menurunkan kadar keberhutangan, meningkatkan gaji penduduk supaya kualiti hidup itu akan dapat dinaikkan. Dan kita lihat dulu semasa Perdana Menteri kita Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim menjadi Menteri Kewangan kali pertama, beliau juga mengambil beberapa langkah yang tidak popular untuk mengurangkan semasa itu kos untuk projek infrastruktur mega dan juga menurunkan gaji menteri, tetapi beliau berjaya memastikan belanjawan ada lebihan. Dan di sekarang ini pun kita lihat situasi yang sama, iaitu komitmen kerajaan untuk menurunkan defisit, yang bermakna mungkin tidak boleh berbelanja dengan mewah seperti dahulu, tetapi sokongan daripada rakyat pun perlu ada. Rakyat perlu faham bahawa apabila sesetengah langkah itu diambil yang nampak macam agak sukar ataupun menyakitkan, tetapi biasanya ubat dia macam tu. Kalau nak sembuh, nak sihat, perlu ada sedikit kesusahan. Yang penting kesabaran dan sokongan itu harus datang daripada semua pihak supaya apa yang dilaksanakannya tidak hanya semata-mata bersifat jangka masa pendek, tetapi pada jangka masa yang panjang negara kita akan mengalami satu situasi yang lebih teruk daripada sekarang.
Okey. Dr. Rasman, terima kasih kerana bersama dengan Niaga Awani pada waktu ini. Kita nantikan perinciannya pada Jumaat ini nanti insya-Allah untuk Belanjawan 2025 yang mana kami akan bawakan secara langsung bermula jam 3 petang hingga 7.30 petang hari Jumaat nanti.
Setinggi mana siling dan lantai ekonomi negara telah dinaikkan? Sejauh mana kualiti dan taraf hidup rakyat telah ditingkatkan? Bagaimana pendekatan seluruh negara jadi kekuatan merealisasikan visi ekonomi madani? Ikuti pembentangan dan kupasan komprehensif Belanjawan 2025 pada 18 Oktober ini hanya di saluran 501 dan di semua platform digital Astro Awani.
Projek Inisiatif Pendapatan Rakyat Usahawan Tani Wilayah Ekonomi Koridor Utara IPR-INTAN NCER di Hospital Bahagia Ulu Kinta Tambun yang dimulakan setahun lalu telah berjaya mengubah kehidupan 30 peserta. Jika sebelum menyertai program, pendapatan mereka tidak menentu, kini kehidupan mereka jauh berubah.
Mereka kini menjadi petani moden yang mengusahakan cili kulai secara vertigasi dengan pendapatan bulanan tetap lebih RM2,000 beserta bonus, simpanan KWSP, berkaso, cuti dan bekerja mengikut waktu pejabat. Salah seorang peserta Zulkarnain Muhammad Zamri, 32 tahun, akui ketika dia bekerja sebagai penghantar makanan, dia terpaksa keluar pagi, balik malam. Namun pendapatan yang diperolehi tidak stabil.
Dan Alhamdulillah dengan peluang yang diberikan untuk menyertai program IPR ni, pendapatan saya Alhamdulillah semakin stabil dan juga orang cakap pendapatan tu maintain lah. Ada kalanya naik, nak cakap turun tu kurang lah. Jarang lah untuk turun. Kebanyakannya maintain ataupun naik. Macam sebelum ni saya masuk sebagai pekerja am. Okey, sebagai pekerja am, lepas tu ditawarkan 2,000 polybag dalam untuk proses penjagaan pokok tu, macam mana kita jaga, macam tu juga hasil yang kita dapat. Okay, daripada hasil yang kita dapat tu, pendapatan bulanan saya boleh mencecah ke RM3,000 sebulan.
Seumpama seorang pejabat awam, peserta IPR-INTAN NCER memulakan rutin seawal jam 8 pagi dengan memeriksa tanaman cili sama ada sihat atau tidak, diikuti dengan pembajaan, mengutip hasil dan meracun serangga perosak. Sementara itu, pengarah Helmi Agri Solution Sdn Bhd yang merupakan syarikat pembimbing, Muhammad Helmi Mazli berkata, pihaknya akan membimbing peserta dari A hingga Z bermula dari merata, tapak hingga kepada pemasaran. Menurutnya, setiap hari 2 tan cili segar dipasarkan ke pasar-pasar borong bukan hanya di sekitar Ipoh, malah turut dihantar ke Selangor dan Kedah termasuk beberapa cawangan pasaraya Maidin.
Memang kita akan tumpukan ke cili fresh A dan B. Okey, yang mana cili C, grade C, kita akan proses jadikan dia cili kering. Okey, kita akan keringkan dia dan kita jadikan dia produk. Okey, salah satu produk yang kita hasilkan adalah chili oil. Okey, chili oil ni pun kita memberi kepada peserta-peserta untuk dia pasarkan. Dia orang buat jualan dan dia orang akan dapat dia punya benefit dia lah. Dia akan dapat dia punya income dia seperti orang kata macam part time.
Menurutnya, selain memperolehi pendapatan, peserta juga layak mendapat sijil kemahiran Malaysia SKM tahap 3 selepas setahun menyertai program itu.
Pemaju hartanah Fajar Baru Builder Group Berhad menerima surat tawaran daripada Penang Development Corporation PDC mengenai cadangan pembangunan Medicity di Batu Kawan meliputi kawasan kira-kira 95.42 hektar. Projek pembangunan itu akan dibahagikan kepada 2 lot dengan Fajar Baru bersedia untuk membeli lot pertama yang meliputi 20.70 hektar pada 2025. Critical Holdings Berhad menerusi Critical M&E Engineering Sdn Bhd menerima kontrak RM62.5 juta daripada IJM Construction Sdn Bhd bagi penyediaan perkhidmatan kejuruteraan mekanikal dan elektrik bagi kilang semikonduktor di Batu Kawan, Pulau Pinang. Menerusi kontrak itu, kumpulan itu akan melaksanakan pembekalan, penghantaran dan pemasangan, ujian, pentauliahan dan penyelenggaraan berkaitan di kilang berkenaan. Hasil UUE Holdings Berhad pada suku kedua berakhir 31 Ogos 2024 meningkat 10.5% dari suku tahun ke suku tahun kepada 43 juta ringgit dipacu pertumbuhan segmen rumusan kejuruteraan utiliti bawah tanah. Kumpulan itu berkata ia juga disokong pertumbuhan positif dalam segmen pembuatan dan perdagangan paip HDPE. Laporan penuh di saluran 501 dan AWANI.com serta daganus.com.
Baik, 3 data yang ingin saya bentangkan pada pagi ini sudah pasti ini dekat di hati kita, soal ringgit kita dan juga Bursa Malaysia setakat pagi ini untuk anda yang melabur dalam equity ataupun pasaran equity pada pagi ini. Kita mulakan dengan ringgit terlebih dahulu untuk melihat perbandingan pertama. Sudah pasti kita melihat kepada bersama dengan dolar Amerika Syarikat setakat pagi ini untuk nilai ringgit. Ini grafnya, semakin rendah graf ini semakin mengukuh keadaan ringgit. Kalau kita lihat setakat pada pagi ini, kedudukan ringgit adalah pada sekitar 4.29 untuk 15 Oktober, 4.3012 berbanding dengan dolar Amerika Syarikat setakat pagi ini. Sedikit kemelesetan untuk nilai ringgit, tetapi berbanding dengan tempoh sebelum ini, ringgit paling rendah pernah mencapai tempoh ataupun nilai 4.1267 pada 27 September yang lepas. Dan ini adalah kedudukan ringgit semasa masih lagi kukuh kalau boleh saya sifatkan berbanding dengan tempoh sebelum ini, kerana pada bulan Februari saya kira kita pernah menyaksikan ringgit yang agak lebih melemah pada ketika itu, pada sekitar saya kira adalah 21 Februari 2024 pada nilai pada ketika itu 4.7916 berbanding dengan dolar Amerika Syarikat, dan pada pagi ini kita melihat 4.2955. Ini berbanding dengan dolar Amerika Syarikat setakat pada pagi ini. Dan sudah pasti banyak faktor yang mempengaruhi kedudukan ringgit untuk kita lihat. Dan kalau kita melihat bahawa langkah seterusnya untuk the Fed di Amerika Syarikat, kiranya di Malaysia inilah Bank Negara Malaysia lah, kalau ada penurunan kadar tersebut, ia mungkin sedikit sebanyak mendorong kepada pengukuhan ringgit yang berterusan. Tetapi apabila ringgit semakin mengukuh, berlakulah pembelian yang banyak untuk nilai ringgit, dan ini sedikit sebanyak menjejaskan kedudukan ringgit semasa. Dan kalau kita melihat pula ringgit berbanding dengan dolar Singapura juga, grafnya juga menyaksikan bahawa sedikit kelemahan nilai ringgit pada tempoh hari ini. Pada 15 Oktober saya kira adalah pada nilai lebih kuranglah 3.2829 ataupun 28617 berbanding dengan dolar Singapura. Sebelum ini ringgit paling mengukuh berbanding dengan dolar Singapura pada tempoh sebelum ini sekitar 26 ataupun 27 September yang lepas, juga pada 3.20 berbanding dengan dolar Singapura. Tetapi ini adalah angka yang agak kukuh. Kalau kita lihat pada Februari lepas, ini adalah 21 Februari yang lepas, nilai ringgit berbanding dengan dolar Singapura 20 Februari adalah 3.5673. Kini 3.28617 untuk dengan kita bandingkan dengan dolar Singapura. Sudah pasti ini amat penting. Singapura rakan dagang utama kita, dan bukan itu sahaja, pergerakan harian antara rakyat kedua-dua negara juga akan lebih kedudukan ringgit ini akan mencerminkan bagaimana mereka berbelanja dan juga kemampuan mereka berbelanja di peringkat sempadan tersebut. Ini secara langsunglah kesannya, dan sudah pasti ini juga penting untuk kita lihat pengaruhnya, kerana pergerakan ringgit berbanding dolar Amerika Syarikat akan juga menentukan bagaimana kedudukan semasa nilai ringgit berbanding dengan dolar Singapura pada ketika ini. Ini agak kukuh kalau kita bersifatkan pada tempoh sekarang ini. Baik, bukan itu saja, jika anda pelabur equity yang melabur, dan kalau anda melabur dalam ETF, pelabur pasif melabur dalam ETF, yang mana mereka melabur di banyak equity yang terpilih sebagai contoh, anda perlu melihat kepada kedudukan Bursa Malaysia setakat pada pagi ini. Kalau kita melihat setakat jam 9.08 pagi seperti digariskan oleh Market Watch ini, 9.08 pagi 15 Oktober, kedudukan FBM KLCI, iaitu papan utama kita, berada pada 1,639.66 mata. Ini peningkatan sebanyak 3.12 mata ataupun bersamaan dengan 0.19% setakat pada pagi ini. Ya, FBM KLCI bukan mencerminkan secara keseluruhan, tapi ini adalah papan utama yang menggambarkan 30 saham berwajaran tinggi di Bursa Malaysia, yang mana ini mencerminkan tahap keyakinan pelabur kepada Bursa Malaysia sendiri. Sudah pasti ada banyak FBM lain juga kita perlu lihat, FBM emas dan juga FBM yang lain juga, termasuk juga di pasaran ACE sendiri, iaitu mid cap ataupun modal pertengahan ini untuk syarikat-syarikat yang disenaraikan di Bursa Malaysia. Tapi setakat pada pagi ini kita melihat di atas 1,600 mata, dan ada kemungkinan bayangan yang diberikan pada event atau majlis baru-baru ini oleh pengerusi Bursa Malaysia sendiri, berkemungkinan kita boleh menyaksikan SBMK-LCI yang mencecah pada 1,800, 1,900 mata. Mungkin menjelang akhir tahun, mungkin bergerak ke tahun hadapan. Ini penting sekali kerana pada akhirnya ialah gambaran itulah gambaran kepada keyakinan pelabur terhadap pasaran Malaysia setelah penstrukturan ekonomi yang kita laksanakan pada ketika ini. Amat penting sekali untuk kita baca ketiga data ini secara bersekali.
Fairness in the costs and the benefits of climate mitigation actions is so central to building public support, but also to ensuring that there is policy stability, which is really what is required across the public and the private sector for some of the long-term investments that the green transition overall requires. But fundamentally, unless there is fairness in the costs and the benefits of climate mitigation actions, we're likely to see pushback to what is really required right now, which is an acceleration of climate action to make sure that our global goals for keeping temperature rises to 1.5 degrees and less are really within sight.
Food systems, as they are currently configured, are not delivering to the farmers, primary producers, as much as they should. How is it possible that those that are responsible for feeding the world themselves are the most undernourished? at the bottom of the chain where the farmers sit, that's where the greatest risk is also sitting. But you then get the lowest return. And as you go up the chain, the risk profile decreases and the value reward actually increases. The other part really is that farmers buy their inputs at retail price. And when they sell their produce, they sell at wholesale prices. We have a situation which is supposed to be the opposite. So I always say that farmers get the wrong end of the stick. Yes, collectively you are one big mass, but you are distributed widely geographically in the hinterland. So you are fragmented. With fragmented power, be it power in terms of your demand for inputs, be it power in terms of your supply inputs, you are not going to get that kind of horsepower, that kind of quantity to influence the discussions. It's not a contract of equals. It's a contract that wittingly or unwittingly gets dictated to you, and it leaves farmers with not much of a choice. And guess what? When there is disaster relief, it goes mainly to consumers. Because those are the most powerful, the most vocal in towns. And there is no assistance given in terms of the capital or assets that have been destroyed. I'm a firm believer of technology as an instrument that can be deployed to address the pain points. The moment you know what prices are obtaining instantly through in other areas or even around you, that information becomes powerful. It becomes the first point of defense when it comes to disaster management. If there's a storm, big storm coming or a cyclone, your first point of defense is information. So connectivity is so fundamental. It's not a luxury. If you are not connected, you are nothing. We're now dealing with agriculture that has become increasingly complex. In many ways, it is science-based, it is data-driven, it is ICT enabled, it is globalized, it is constantly changing. It is now in the head than in the hands. So it now requires a different aptitude to abstract and to deal with it. It's much more about strategy, about planning. It's no longer about working the fields, producing a good crop. When they say make agricultural sexy, the sexiness is in a profitable enterprise that delivers the same quality of life as what the banking sector or the manufacturing sector does. When climate issues are talked about, it's much more about how can the farmers adapt and mitigate. It is not about how can the entire chain behave. So if we can take a chain approach, and there could be creative ways of making everyone pay. That's the reason why people pay taxes. That's the reason why companies pay taxes. That could go towards funding.
It's settling into a better equilibrium in a sense than what we were seeing last year when inflation was high, or even year before last when inflation was even higher. So inflation has come down. And so you see that advanced economies are starting to think about growth again rather than inflation. So that part is good. The problem is that the growth that the world economy is settling into is much lower than what we saw in the 2000s. It's even lower than what we saw in the 2010s, which was lower than the beginning of this millennium. So in a sense, what's happening is that we've seen a step down in terms of growth from the first decade of this millennium to the second to the third. The big concern has to do with what we call secular stagnation. So which means slowing productivity growth and adverse demographics. I mean, essentially the aging of the population and declining labor force participation. That basically means that these countries have actually done reasonably well in growing into what we call middle income levels, which are somewhere between $1,500 and $15,000. But then instead of growing through these middle income levels, they tend to stall in them. If you look at their per capita incomes over the last decade or so, they have not grown at all. In fact, they might even have shrunk in some parts of the world. So we are worried that they are going into a period, because the world economy is not doing nearly as well as it should, because their trading partners are not doing well, they might end up actually having very slow growth. And these are countries that actually have fairly high population growth rates. So as a result of it, as their growth rates fall and the population growth rates remain high, their per capita income levels fall. You actually continue to service your debt, but you divert money from other things. And the other things usually are education, health, investments in infrastructure, and so on. And as a result of it, what happens is that the state of the people becomes poorer and the state of the economy gets worse. What gives me hope are countries like the United States, which have a very vibrant private sector. And I feel that the private sector will bail out the US economy again and again. So I have a lot of confidence in it. What gives me hope also are countries like India and Indonesia, that these countries are actually doing very well. They could do even better, but they're doing rather well. And then what gives me hope is that even among the poor countries, the really poor countries, there are always good examples that actually show the others that you can take really adverse circumstances. I mean, things like civil conflict and really bad geography and so on, and you can convert that into progress for girls, for boys, and for women, and for men, everybody. And I'm talking about countries like Rwanda.
Bila kerja sendiri, semua kena buat sendiri. Tapi, bersama rakan niaga, semuanya dapat ditempuhi bersama.
Nak coklat? Hari ni tak boleh. Nanti saya kena dengan mak saya.
Pepsodent baharu disahkan halal. Mikrokalsium aktif dan Pro-Florida Kompleks membantu memperbaiki lubang halus akibat makanan manis sebelum menjadi kaviti untuk perlindungan maksimum. Pepsodent.
Dibawakan oleh penaja utama jelajah Jiwa SME, Unify Business, rakan digital pilihan anda. Thank you for tuning in on Niaga AWANI, and right now we're in the conversation of digitalization, where the tech industry is constantly evolving rapidly across the globe, and not just in Malaysia, and with new tools and technologies emerging at an incredible pace. We have AI, artificial intelligence, we have automation, semiconductor, many more going on, IoT, Internet of Things. And right now, businesses everywhere are striving to stay competitive by adopting these innovations, and also they streamline operations and also to enhance customer experience and also growth at the same time. So in Malaysia, we have this adoption. The government is actively promoting digital adoption, especially among SMEs, and they have initiated through these some initiatives like NIMP 2030, and they also have the My Digital Blueprint introduced by them. So this transformation is not just by staying competitive today, but also about future-proofing all these businesses in an increasingly connected and digital world. However, these rapid investments have outpaced the development of corresponding skills within the workforce. So that's what we want to talk about today. So we have the right authority to discuss on this. We have founder of Open Minds, Jen Wong, joining me in the studio this morning. How are you? Good morning.
Good morning. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much. Perhaps we could start with whatever that I said earlier with introduction. Perhaps you could start with explaining or introduction about an overview of the current state of digital adoption and about the workforce readiness in Malaysia right now.
Sure. I think we live in very interesting times today. I mean, you mentioned very well earlier that technology is really being pushed, not just by the tech companies themselves, but different government authorities as well in Malaysia. So you see a lot of initiatives being rolled out, you see a lot of good work being put out as well, a lot of training programs, a lot of resources given. But if you ask me honestly, when it comes to the industry readiness, I think there's still a lot of gap in many areas. There is an awareness gap, there's a legacy problem, there's a competency gap as well. And all this kind of restricts the growth to some extent of Malaysia as a whole. Why I say that is because, let's talk about a simple one. Let's talk about legacy issues, right? There are a lot of companies in Malaysia that is very tied back to a lot of legacy processes and structures, and this actually restricts them from growing because it's always, oh, I've been in business for 20, 30 years right now. Why should I use technology? Why should I learn? You know, we've been okay so far. We've been earning good money, bigger family business sometimes as well. They see no need to evolve. And to be honest, if it's not because of the COVID lockdowns, we may be in a far behind state compared to today. If it's because of COVID, that's why we force ourselves, but still there's a gap even with legacy issues. Then comes by very closely is the whole awareness to digitization. Many people, when we talk about digitization, they think about AI, they think about robots, they think about big data. Sounds expensive, sounds complex even, but in reality it's not like that. Right? Digitization could be as simple as, oh, instead of just taking orders offline, now maybe you can try WhatsApp, or you can use social channels, you can try automating different things, but somehow the mindset of a lot of SME owners especially is still stuck somewhere.
Basically, when we talk about all these jargons, actually it hit me as well when we first introduced with AI and all those these big technology. It had hit me as well. But in your opinion, what could be the factors that actually contributed to all these gaps that you mentioned earlier?
I think it's also because of the level of education or literacy when it comes to this word digitization. But it's not someone to blame actually. It's also because a lot of times when we read articles, a lot of the articles like to talk about these jargons. So even on social media, when we read business news, right, everybody's talking about these few things. So it causes a lot of misunderstanding within the industry. But in actual fact, when we talk about digitization, we are really just talking about how can technology make life or make business run smoother or easier? How can we optimize processes? So when we think about it from that extent, right, it's to the level where even a burger store by the roadside can actually digitize, all the way if you are a chain of businesses or even if an MNC, that also applies to you. But at different level, this word could apply in different shapes and sizes.
Like I mentioned earlier, we have few initiatives that was introduced by our government. We have My Digital initiatives and also the NIMP 2030 that's speaking mainly of this digital transformation. So in your opinion, does these initiatives actually meet, or actually how is the disconnection between the readiness, workforce readiness, and digital transformation at the same time?
First and foremost, I think all these initiatives are great because these initiatives supports in the area of sometimes hiring, competency upgrade, or even from a perspective of funding. But I think there are still several gaps that is yet to be addressed. Number one, sometimes these initiatives or these resources that's given are a little bit inaccessible. So when I say inaccessible, because sometimes the right information is not disseminated. A lot of businesses, a lot of individuals are unaware that such initiatives even exist. And if they know that exists, they are not familiar even with the process of signing up for it. Where do they go to apply? Who qualifies? What are the considerations? How much are they able to get? You know, all these intricacies sometimes is not very made known to the public. Therefore, it forms some sort of a barrier. But on top of that, there's also the limitation of sometimes being too basic or too specific. So in this digitization topic, right, there's always two groups of resources in play. One, the extremely basic. So these are the, or if you don't know anything, there's a kind of like a startup thing coming on, you know, and then you just go in and learn the basics. And then there's one that's super specialized. These are the one they mentioned, deep tech lah. You need to really understand, you know, the experts that go into. But a lot of us in the SME scene actually falls in between. We kind of know, so we don't need the basic. We don't need people to tell us what is AI, what is ChatGPT. We kind of figure it out already. But at the same time, we are not like, oh, we know everything about data analytics and now we just want to scale globally. And this is the part where I think needs a lot of help and attention on.
And when we talk about digitization, especially in businesses, we have to think about the SMEs as well, the small, medium, and also medium enterprises. So these are the team or segments that can actually have problem when it comes to digitalization in their business.
That's right.
So with all this government's efforts like NIMP and the My Digital earlier, we know that they still report a lack of digital talent. So when it comes to that, what do you think are the main barriers that preventing for the fully effectiveness of these initiatives?
One of the main things we've actually briefly talked about just now, when we talk about talents, right? A lot of the education access that we have right now again still focuses on the basic level. So for example, we talked about ChatGPT earlier. All of us are probably quite familiar with ChatGPT by now. We've already played around with it. But how do we apply ChatGPT into actual business use cases? How do we
actually use it on a daily basis?
We do, we do. And not just
newsroom
me.
as well.
Yes. Oh, really? Okay, that's great. But there are a lot of people out there, right? They're lost in transition. So they know it's fun. They use it like an alternative to Google. But how do you apply it to business? How do they apply it to shorten their decision-making process? Now, that's a question mark. Same goes to even when you talk about big data or customer relationship management or doesn't automation work? Again, the problem is, okay, I'm familiar with the concept, but how do I apply it? So the whole thing about the talent pool right now, I think it's still considered quite in the infancy stage. Of course, it takes time for education to build up, but at the same time, it's the ability to practice some of this knowledge that's being acquired. Now, that is where I think a lot of challenges start as well. So you can attend a course, and then I come back to my office, and then, what can I do with all these materials, right? I've learned all that is necessary, but there's no real-life application to apply. So that is one of the reasons why this talent gap is also there. And then number two, because of the first reason, a lot of companies, SMEs, or even the medium-sized companies, right, they find it, they don't know when to hire such talent as well. When they hire, they don't know which part of the business they should place them in. Should they be considered as part of the IT team? Is it a marketing team? Is it a customer success team?
Or admin team?
Or admin team even, exactly. Or even the content creation team, right? So they find it lost. So as companies are still stuck within this conundrum in understanding or finding a fit for them, they are very also reluctant to hire. Then guess what? The third problem happens. Some of these good talents migrate. They go into Singapore, they go into other countries which so-called they're more accepting of this technical AI-based or digitized talents, and therefore leaving us in, again, a lack within the talent pool.
Still on the initiatives, like government has done their part, they have introduced few initiatives, and also, but we can still, there's a gap that you mentioned earlier. So what can they do differently, the government also stakeholders do differently to actually make sure that the businesses and also SMEs can actually adopt this digitalization? Because the effort is there, the thought is there, but how can we do better or foster this technological development in all businesses?
I think there are two things that still has much room to be worked on. One is the engagement bit, one is the collaboration bit. So when I talk about engagement, I'm talking about how even government sectors should actually have more engagement with the private sectors to understand where is the market at right now. Do we really need more on the expert level, or do we still need to focus on the infancy stage for the beginners? And where is the main focus that the government should actually go on in terms of the entire life cycle of a particular company? That's one. But collaborations also become very important. I think as amazing the government is now in building all these policies and pushing Malaysia into more digitized nation, there is always limited capacity in actually rolling out some of these initiatives. So extending some of this into maybe some of the tech giants that we have are coming or investing to Malaysia right now to make it more accessible for the masses, I think that's very, very important. So when we do that, I think the government is able to decentralize the education, they're able to decentralize the resources, therefore reaching a lot more pockets of businesses rather than just those that are familiar with some of these policies.
Let's put in a situation where we put SMP, for example. What happens in the long run, in the long term, if they don't actually adopt this digitalization in their business? What happened to their economic growth?
Oh, I think the impact is actually quite significant. I mean, just look around, right? A lot of countries right now are all moving towards a similar direction. If some of these initiatives are not able to rise up, not just new talents, but businesses that thrive within this area, I think overall the competitiveness of Malaysia or SMEs will be greatly hampered. Why? Because other countries are moving a lot quicker with the infra and all that. And if we continue to stay where we are, that's going to be one major limit. But that's not all. When this happens, that also limits the amount of talents that we will put out. I mean, the talent pool in Malaysia will look less appealing compared to people from other countries, which is not true, actually. But when the take-up rate of digitization is at low, these talents have nowhere to go to expand. I mean, it's not just about digitization. We have seen this happen before in other industries like esports or even the animation industry, where we have such great talents, but there's so little demand within Malaysia. And therefore, that when this has an imbalance, that's where the entire gap actually surfaces, becoming bigger and bigger.
It's a chicken and egg situation, after all.
It's a chicken and egg situation, that's right.
And when we talk about the challenges, it's, like you mentioned, it limits the ability to innovate, increase the productivity, and also how can we actually to remain competitive in the global market. So in your opinion, what are some of the risks or downside risks that businesses, actually, especially in high-tech sectors, can actually face due to this skills shortage in the long term?
I think the first obvious one is going to be an increase of costs, because we are no longer able to leverage on local talents or to build local talents. That means that companies will need to depend a lot on foreign money or foreign talent, and that is always not a very good thing for us Malaysians here. Anyway, not only it limits our capabilities, it limits our growth. That's one. But number two, when this is also limited to them, that means the access to certain infrastructures would also be limited, because it's a demand and supply thing, right? And if the demand is high but the supply is low, then they have to look elsewhere to acquire such support, whether it's external infra, whether it's, again, foreign resources coming in. I mean, some people may argue to say that it looks great from a FDI investment perspective. That could mean more money coming to Malaysia, but at the same time, our talents are all being exported externally. So again, it's a vicious cycle being activated that may not be so good even for some of these high-tech companies.
And this imbalance in the skill gap, actually, it's been worrying in the whole industry. So how can actually MarTech Solutions plays their role in helping businesses achieve this digital maturity?
Great question. I think it starts from the very basic. It starts from the mindset of a lot of these companies to first recognize that there is a need to digitize, because this is the first barrier towards the whole legacy issue. So if you're able to address that, the next step is for businesses to recognize within the entire business operations, are there areas that is outstanding, that requires help from
crucial.
digital. Yeah, so whether it's customer service, whether it's content creation, whether it's with decision making, generating reports, or just automating some of the mundane processes, it's good to start off with that small bit. Why I say that is because a lot of companies jump into the very extreme picture when it comes to digitization. Oh, I want to digitize this. Let's revamp the entire company's operation. Let's hire a new team of people, 5 people, 10 people, 20 people in, just to undertake that one particular task in which they don't know whether it works for them or not in day one. So when they start progressively, what they're able to do is to start a small department, maybe test it out with 3 to 5 people. Maybe you can even start with some free tools just to see whether it works for you. And if it works, then you hire. Then you expand capabilities. Then you implement more sophisticated solutions to help you address that particular gap.
But how do you measure the actual digital maturity? Do you have any benchmarks to see their progress?
Oh, I think there are a lot of sophisticated tools to do it. But the simplest of all, right, is literally as a department owner or even as a company owner, you just need to match it with your immediate business goals first. So for example, if I look at the content team, very simple matrix. The content team right now is able to do, I don't know, 1 piece of content a day. Now, maybe your goal was to do 3. By implementing such a tool, how far can we go? Can we really hit 3? Or is it still at 1? If it's 1, something is wrong. If it's 1.5, maybe there's something that can be done from there as well. So a lot of these matrix should be identified very closely to a company's goal or objectives in the first place. Because every company is different. They have different needs to look at. Some it's really, like you said, the productivity side of things. For some, it's really just, I want to have better governance, and it's taking too much time and effort to do it manually. And all these different aspects have different level of matrix. Companies can identify it, use that as a start at least. Then you can look at the more complicated calculations out there.
Do you have any success stories or actually examples how Martech has actually helped in digitization of her business?
Oh, plenty. There are plenty. This can take the entire day actually.
The whole segment.
The whole segment.
No worries, you can share at least 1 or 2.
Sure. I remember there was one automotive project that we actually work on, right? And when it first came to us, they were very fixated in improving marketing output. But when we looked at the entire case study, we realized that the real problem wasn't marketing. It was actually how they are able to budget more effectively to target the right audience. And traditionally, they relied a lot on a manual approach. So they're a global company. What they do is they did a lot of offline surveys, which is very common until today. They go and survey the market, what they're buying, what do they like to buy, where do they go to buy, the method of buying, the usual works, right? And that takes a lot of time. And we realized that whatever they've collected, when it's transited online, somehow there's always a mismatch. So what we did together, we helped them actually launch a whole digitized data collection method using a loyalty program. Very simple. Basically, the existing customers will download the particular app, they'll use it, but as we collect the data, that actually informs the client which aspect they should invest more, so that overall, when you look at the entire advertising and marketing budget, it actually reduced. It becomes a lot more optimized. And that allows them to make better decisions. Oh, in this particular season, I should push out product A. In this particular season, let's lower down budget for product A because it doesn't make sense. Let's push product B and product C. So overall, this actually enables a company to make very specific marketing decisions rather than just on an emotional basis. Oh, everybody's doing this, let's promote this right now as well. Oh, I think this works great, let's promote more of this particular product. But it doesn't work that way. So cost optimization can also play a big part in digitization.
So it doesn't only save cost, it saves time as well at the same time. So the optimization is the most important thing in this transformational of digitization. Right. So let's look at your long-term vision, especially what are your long-term vision for Malaysia's digital landscape, and especially in terms of workforce readiness, and where do you see the Malaysia in the next 5 to 10 perhaps years?
I think we live in quite optimistic times in Malaysia right now. It's quite a good timing with all this good news of foreign companies setting up shop in Malaysia and Malaysia having this whole entire digital roadmap being rolled out for the entire nation. I think we're on a good track. So if you ask me where do I see the level of education or literacy towards digitization to greatly increase, at least within the next 3 to 5 years. We are already seeing some of these early signs happening. I work very closely with universities, and I see a lot of universities in Malaysia even is putting a lot of emphasis, even beyond their fixed curriculum, to expose students to what's happening on the outside world. So all these are stepping stone towards being a so-called a more digitized nation, which is a good thing. And I think where I'm at right now, although I still see a gap between what is being offered and what can we offer.
The balance, yeah?
Yeah, the balance is still not really there yet. But I think as one of the companies within Malaysia, we are also very geared towards to see what we can do to match this to basically Malaysians.
To bridge the gap, yeah?
To bridge the gap, that's right.
And as for an industry expert yourself, how do you see any trends or emerging technologies that you see in the future, perhaps that could actually accelerate the digital literacy and also the workforce readiness in Malaysia, especially in this digitalization?
I know we talk about jargons as confusing just now, but I think I also still need to put out this jargon, which is...
It's not only jargons, it's how do I say, it's hard to pronounce it as well,
even,
digitalization.
Right? Exactly. But I think there's one word we cannot escape from today, which is AI, artificial intelligence, right? And I don't just say AI in the form of generic terms, but you talk about upskilling workforce or even talent. AI plays a big role in education too. Why I say that is because AI today is able to even cater to your learning pace, to showcase to you the right information that you should know then. All the way towards AI in our daily lives, AI within the work that we particularly do as well. This becomes a major component moving forward. Never there was a time where AI was so accessible and cheap.
Yeah.
Never was. It was only because of ChatGPT, OpenAI, that opens up the algorithm. More people are familiar with it. And then because today all of us have smartphones carrying with us, and then big companies like Apple and Google are pushing very much on AI. Because of this barrier of entry towards AI getting smaller and smaller, that actually benefits us as individuals, as companies, as a nation as well, to tap into this power into the next few years.
Anything that you can say, all the business owners out there on this, on the digitalizing their businesses?
Sure. Don't be afraid of digitalization. Don't be fearful of some of these so-called difficult to pronounce jargons, because with every jargon, there's always a way to go in at the smallest, easiest manner possible. Start small, try it out, don't be fearful, and I'm sure once you experience 1 or 2 successes, upgrading from there wouldn't be a problem at all.
Amazing. And we believe that by closing this gap actually requires a targeted hands-on digital education and skill to not to just upskill but reskill the Malaysians, the workforce and the whole ecosystem as well. So thank you so much to Jen Wong, the founder of Open Minds, for sharing your insights and for helping me understand better on this journey as well. So thank you so much, and you can find whole discussion on all of our social media and astrowani.com.
Dibawakan oleh penaja utama jelajah Jiwa SME, Unify Business, rakan digital pilihan anda.
Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Cara kita mendapat berita kian berubah. Melalui media sosial maupun saluran digital yang lain serta kaca TV. Kami sentiasa membawakan yang tergempar dan terkini.
Kita buat sesuatu yang berbeza.
Teraskan acuan verifikasi yang diamalkan supaya setiap fakta adalah sahih. Daripada analisis pelbagai sudut yang mendalam, laporan-laporan khas dan perbincangan yang membina negara. Inklusif, suara rakyat kami ajukan. Keseimbangan persepsi kami pastikan. Kerana setiap cerita mempunyai impak yang tersendiri dan perlu dibawa dengan penelitian yang terperinci. Pastikan Astro AWANI menjadi pilihan anda tidak kira di mana sahaja anda berada. Saluran berita paling dipercayai di Malaysia.
17 Oktober ini, Home of Sports Astro mempermudahkan anda menerokai lebih banyak aksi sukan secara langsung. Astro Grandstand. Nikmati perlawanan